皆さんおはようございます。いよいよ最終日になりました。皆さんお疲れのことと思いますが、最終日の最終セッションです。頑張りましょう。それで、ちょっと待ってくださいね。時計合わしますね。すみません。はい。それでですね、第11セッションは、みんな、ソフィア大学からの報告になります。ソフィア大学は、普通だった世界の一番最後に開催して、あの時はいろいろお世話になりありがとうございました。で、最初に発表していただくのは、ラチェバ・プラメラ先生とステラ・ジブコバ先生による、浮世絵コレクション in Bulgaria and curious case of little known artistic access, Bulgaria-China-Japan, the 1950s and beyond です。どうぞよろしくお願いします。
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here on the very last day. It's a great pleasure, and frankly speaking, I didn't expect you to prepare my presentation to that beauty that is outside. I would like to actually say great thanks to Mrs. Plamena Racheva, who is one of the most famous Bulgarian graphic artists, and she has been, thank you. She has been a director of some of the Bulgaria's most prestigious art galleries, last one being the one in Varna, a city which is bordering Black Sea. So thanks to her effort and to my ability to stay put, we are going to present a topic about ukiyo-e collection that reached a Bulgarian gallery starting from Japan, going through China, and ending up in Bulgaria. First, I would like to say that in general, I enjoy conferences of EAJRS because they're conferences about research in process, and exactly that is what our research is. It's in process. It has started 2 years ago, but we're just in the middle, and the trouble is that sometimes we feel in the middle of nowhere. You will see why. But I love being here because advice and encouragement are most appreciated. So big yoroshiku onegaishimasu to all of you. First, let me tell you that there are 4 collections, ukiyo-e collections in Bulgaria. Those of you who've been to Sofia know about this one, which is displayed in Square 500, Kvadrat 500, in the art gallery that you visited back in 2019. It contains 114 ukiyo-e prints dated 18th to 19th century. That collection is the only one that we actually know about in terms of how it was obtained by the gallery. It was bought by the Committee of Art and Culture, which is a kind of agency attached to the Ministry of Culture of Bulgaria. Unfortunately, there is no digital access yet, but if you want to see it, you can visit. The second one, which contains 30 ukiyo-e prints, is displayed in Plovdiv. And actually, this exhibition is connected to Mrs. Racheva, who used to be a director there in the 80s. Thanks to her, this collection was actually photographed and printed out on huge posters in a big set. I will show you later. So maybe this is the best known collection of ukiyo-e in Bulgaria to wider public. Actually, the curious thing about it is that it consists of 30 prints, which form half of a previously owned collection, which was bought in Japan by the last cultural attaché in the embassy in Tokyo, in Bulgarian embassy in Tokyo. The second part of this 60 pieces collection is actually in Sliven Gallery. In Sliven Gallery, we have 30 more ukiyo-e prints, and they are displayed there every about 10 years. They often visit cities and city galleries in Bulgaria, but basically they stay stored because of the sensitivity of the pigments and the idea of the gallery workers to preserve the ukiyo-e prints in the best condition. And the last collection that is actually on display, actually is not on display, but it's available in Bulgaria, is in Silistra. It also contains 30 prints. And we know that it was donated to the gallery by a Bulgarian painter who studied graphics and aquarelle in People's Republic of China in 1953. This is a little part of the collection. The reason I chose to show these prints is that you can see 3 famous portraits of actors, and also you can see warriors. How this is connected to the presentation, you will find out a bit later. We focus on Silistra because not only because the ukiyo-es are so beautiful, not only because the artists are so famous, but because the time of donation is 1971. As most of you are familiar, this is the time when Bulgaria used to be a socialist republic, closely connected to the USSR, which means that a collection of Japanese graphics entering Bulgaria via China is something quite unusual, and it has been our scientific interest how that happened and how that was made possible. Actually, we know that the person thanks to whom we have the collection is called Mircho Yakubov, and he was born, excuse me, I forgot to put the red point, so I will stand up. He was born in Romania in a city called Racheva, and then he moved to Bulgaria in a city called Stella. So he lived and studied in Silistra, and in 1950s, he was enrolled in the Bulgarian National Academy of Art. He started studying painting and graphics. At that time, due to his effort, which he put in his studies, he was selected to be sent to study in the USSR. At the same time, in the autumn of 1953, Bulgaria signed several documents for cultural exchange with China. So instead of going to the USSR, Mircho Yakubov went to China and stayed there for 6 years. He studied at the Central Academy of Fine Art in Beijing. He was lucky. He was extremely lucky to be supervised by Zhivkova. Excuse my pronunciation. I hope you understand me. I'm not a specialist in Chinese. So if somebody wants to point out that my pronunciation is bad, please do it now. How should I pronounce it? I'll do my best. And also Lihua, I'm also not sure, but please bear with me despite my pronunciation. The name I'm quite sure about how to pronounce is Hide Kawanishi. Hide Kawanishi is a famous graphic artist of Japan. And actually, he was invited to China several times for holding workshops and teaching. And our Bulgarian artist, Mircho Yakubov, was really lucky to study under his supervision. Our hypothesis is that he might have obtained the collection I'm talking about, containing 30 pieces. He might have obtained that from Kamanishihide, because, as I showed you, just a second, part of this collection, about 1/3 of the collection, actually consists of portraits of artists, of actors. And Kawanishi himself was fond of circus, opera, theater, and so on and so forth. So we might assume that due to his interest in theatrical art, he actually collected ukiyo-es that focus on theatrical actors. Let me tell you several things just to make sure that you keep track of like the political situation at that time, which is quite far away from us now. In China, the situation in the 50s and early 50s actually, was quite interesting in terms of the fact that all the private owners of printers, publishing houses, and bookstores were actually forced to quit. So we might think that Mircho Yakubov, who had the collection I'm talking about that now belongs to Silistra Gallery, was actually obtained through one of those stores that had to quit in order to actually follow the rules that were enforced on them. We also need to mention that 1956, 1957, the notorious, the 100 Flowers campaign, actually was on in China, and due to it, people had some freedom to actually think about going abroad or talking to people who came from abroad. And maybe that is one of the reasons Hide Kawanishi appeared there. We cannot be sure. Actually, I contacted several museums and also Kawanishi's relatives in order to clarify facts about his being in China at that time, but I could not obtain any information. They told me that he was not keeping diaries or anything, so I cannot be sure why he was in China at that time. Yeah, we need to talk about the anti-racist campaign, due to which actually Chinese artists took special turn into like choosing topics for depicting things in their pictures and so on and so forth. And we will see that due to that anti-racist campaign, actually China hugged in a very strong and decisive way the rules of socialist realism, part of which actually forced painters to depict workers, laborers, soldiers, warriors, people who died in order to actually allow the socialist idea to flourish. And we'll see that in Mircho Yakubov's pictures when we get to them in a little bit. It's interesting to say that in 1949, when China actually China announced to the world its existence, Bulgaria was the second country following the USSR to recognize the newly formed People's Republic of China, which might be the reason why Bulgaria and China so quickly formed agreements for cultural, political, economical, and agricultural exchange at that time. And due to that active political and cultural exchange, actually, it was possible for Bulgarian artists to go to China and vice versa for Chinese to go to Bulgaria, which we will see in a little bit, reflecting the whole story about Ukiyoe-e collection reaching Bulgaria. Let me give you some more facts. In 1952, there was this bilateral cultural cooperation agreement, part of which actually contained the statement that students as well as academic advisors will be visiting Chinese teachers will be visiting Bulgaria, Bulgarians will be going to China in order to actually improve and kind of like help crystallize the idea of what exactly socialist art will be like. There were, of course, many conferences and many exhibitions show in Sofia and Beijing. And very soon, Plamena, Racheva, and I will be publishing an article that follows all those exhibitions and gives more detail about each and every of them. The interesting thing is that for quite a long time, for about like 10 years, the rules of socialist realism had been defined. And as I already mentioned, part of them meant that thematically, aesthetically, socialist realism must contradict the art of the capitalist, which means the bad at that time West, and must oppose to modernist tendencies that were actually spreading around the world at that time. How we know things about Mircho Yakubov, his studying in China, and possibly about his obtaining the Ukiyoe-e collection, actually through the diary of Professor Vasil Zakhariev Stoyanov, who is a Bulgarian graphic artist and art historian. And many consider him the founder of Bulgarian graphics, but for sure, he was the founder of the graphic art department at the Bulgarian National of Art, which is in Sofia. His diaries contain names of most famous contemporary Chinese artists and sculptors. We counted about 70 of them, which means that he at least had met them. If like he didn't have the chance to work, he had met them and talked to them. And of course, those talks in that artistic way influenced his art in the future. An interesting mention in his diary, dated October 6th, 1956, is that he met Xi Baishu. Apologies. And he wrote many things like he is one of the most interesting collocutors I've ever met. I learned so many things within that one evening and so on and so forth. Of course, he kept meeting him, but that is about visiting the professor at home, which means that some trust was built between the two of them. We may assume that many other meetings followed. And when Professor Vasil Zakhariev came back to Bulgaria, he gave a series of lectures, both academic and for wider public, with focus on the Chinese painters' collection with the rich tradition of Chinese painting and its application in the contemporary socialist art of China. Professor Vasil Zakhariev even published a book. It's in Bulgarian. It's a monography on Xi Baishu's art and his influence on other Chinese painters. Of course, due to the agreement regulations, Vasil Zakhariev had to help organize exhibitions of Chinese painters in Bulgaria, and he gladly did that. In one of the papers that Vasil Zakhariev wrote, we read about Mircho Yakubov. This is our painter from Silistra. We read about Mircho Yakubov's first solo exhibition in Bulgaria. Let me remind you that Mircho Yakubov went to China in 1953. He came back to Bulgaria in 1959, and very soon after coming back, he had his first exhibition in Sofia, the capital of Bulgaria. Interesting enough, for a young painter, he received excellent notes from famous professors. One of them being this one that I will talk about in the next slide. And we can assume that actually it was not in vain that Mircho Yakubov studied in China under Li Hua and Kawanishi's guidance, because the article that praises him says, I'm not going to read the whole thing. He says that in his paintings, we can really read his excellent communication with his Chinese and Japanese instructors, especially in terms of means of expression, and also some very landmark things like the boneless painting, Mogu, if that is the pronunciation, which is typical of Xi Baishu, is very easy to see in Mircho Yakubov's paintings. Also his mastery in using the complex shade, also the panoramic landscapes, and as you will see in a second, and natural views are also seen as an influence obtained from his teachers. But the most interesting and the most remarkable thing that we need to know about his painting is the gentle graduation and muted watercolor, which gives the special depth so typical of Chinese in paintings, and emotional intensity too. Just to show you his teacher's paintings, this is Xi Baishu, and some very, very tiny, and actually due to my test down selection of his paintings. Of course, the Japanese influence can be also seen, and we have chosen actually quite randomly Ukiyoe-e, in which you can see a very nice Bijin holding her hand like this and tilting her head. A nearly similar portrait of a Bulgarian woman was done by Mircho Yakubov when he came back to Bulgaria in 1959, and it was exhibited in Silistra Gallery. Other things that we might notice in common between Japanese art and Mircho Yakubov's paintings is the passion for depicting, well, not just birds. but depicting Bulgarian birds, which are compared to the Japanese famous cranes. Those are pelicans. Silistra, the city where the gallery is and where Mircho Yakubov studied, is famous for a natural reserve where pink pelicans live. I think it's the only place in Europe where you can see pink pelicans. So those things which are not pink are actually pink pelicans, and depicted in black and gold, because that was the feeling that our painter had after studying in China, Japanese and Chinese technique. Another thing that I need to say is that he actually learned from Kawanishi, a technique that is famous for for being actually called bent chisel technique, in which you use that chisel to create your graphic, and it gives smoother outline of the depicted objects. We can compare Kawanishi's, picture and Mircho Yakubov's picture to the right. Another thing that he actually learned from his teachers was the peace idea. Maybe most of you know that Kawanishi was actually granted the Kobe Shimbun Peace Prize. And we assume, we're not sure that that white dove picture was actually drawn by Chi Baisho and his apprentices in China, and was possibly displayed during the Helsinki Peace Conference in 1955. Let me remind you of the socialist realism trends in order to actually go further with Mircho Yakubov's pictures, which show the influence he obtained. Thematic exhibitions depicting working people, staying close to the life of the working class, art is for the people, and it must be understood by them, and also heroes who gave their life for the socialist idea must be depicted in pictures. To the left, in red frames, you can see Li Hua's pictures, and some pictures we assume are influenced by Li Hua's, drawn by Mircho Yakubov to the right. So Li Hua and Mircho Yakubov. The thing that we could not find data about, and we must keep working on, is a painting, actually it's a graphic called Hiroshima. We know, we have record that Mircho Yakubov drew something called Hiroshima, but we could not find any track of it. And a big question mark, Mircho Yakubov named that picture, do not forget Fukuromaru, but who is Fukuromaru? We do not know. I would much appreciate if you have any idea. My only idea of Fukuro is the owl, but the owl has definitely nothing to do with that person who is depicted there. So we do not know who Fukuromaru is, and that is something we must focus on in our future research. Last known facts about Mircho Yakubov's life is that after his return to Bulgaria, he was appointed main artist at the Bulgarian Central Army Hall. He held a lot of exhibitions. Most of them were, of course, collective exhibitions with other of his colleagues, and all of them were done according to the principle of the socialist realism, which were prevalent at the time. His last solo exhibition was, 1971 in Silistra Art Gallery, and that is the year when he donated what he brought from China to the gallery, which means the collection I mentioned about. The last thing we ever know about him is that in the 80s, through Vienna, he left Bulgaria for Canada, and that is where traces stopped. I contacted Bulgarian embassy in Canada, but they could not help me, saying that since Mircho Yakubov did not commit any crime, they have no idea what he had done in Canada. That's it. So objective 1, objective 2, objective 3 of our study, we must keep working because the topic is interesting, because it's not finished, but because I believe that finding data about the topic I'm talking about, this curious collection and its way to Bulgaria, it must prove useful for some other research, for other people, or just to satisfy our own scientific curiosity. Thank you.
Zhivkova 先生、どうもありがとうございました。質問のある方は、はい、小山さんどうぞ。小山さん、待って。
Hello, sorry. that means Daigo Fukuryumaru. Sorry. Yeah. You mentioned Fukuromaru, but that means Daigo Fukuryumaru. Very famous in all Japanese children of my generation. They watch saw the films about yeah.
Thank you very much.
他に質問のある方いらっしゃいますでしょうか。はい。バンデバーラ先生。
Thank you very much for a wonderful presentation. I was wondering how Kamanishihide got to China. I mean, I suppose that he must have been linked or at least introduced by the Japanese Communist Party or something in that direction, or maybe a Chinese-Japanese Friendship Association. And you probably may find some reference to him if you look in that direction. I don't know whether you have done that.
No,
Because it's fairly mysterious, of course, that he pops up in 53 in China, unless he has this connection, because Communist Party members who had escaped repression in Japan stayed in China in the beginning of until the beginning of the 50s. So there may have been a link with some of them. And that's probably why he got to China that early on, because that's very early, isn't it?
It is, and Professor Valdevelo, thank you so much for the great idea. I did not do any search in that direction. I only contacted people who I had addresses of, for example, his relative or museums. But I really have no idea how to access the Communist Party of Japan, which doesn't exist anymore, does it? Okay, so in order to do that research, I will much appreciate your guidance.
I think recently I went through a road in Tokyo called, I think, Guchidori or Kido-dori, and there was a Japanese Communist Party office there. So that was just before, in the run-up to the elections. But, I'm sure if you, walk into there or in any other place and you ask for their archives, or they have documentation somewhere. So I think they can teach you a lot. This is generally not very well known, but people who are connected with the Communist Party must know the way to the archives, I suppose.
Thank you so much. I wish myself good luck with that.
They probably will be friendly enough because they usually, they escape most of, not many people have any interest in them. So I think I suspect that they will be welcoming if a foreigner show some interest in their history or in their activities and in the suffering they have gone through during the war and immediately after the war, I suppose. So
thank you so much. I hope things will turn out well about this. Actually, it keeps being a mystery how a Japanese person appeared in China at that time, because, well, the world was divided into communist and non-communist, which means capitalists. So how actually a capitalist appeared in a communist country and he was allowed to teach is a great topic for research, maybe not only for me, maybe for a whole team of researchers. Thank you so much.
There was a friendship association, Chinese-Japanese Friendship Association, before any official diplomatic ties were established. So if you look for them, I suppose that you will get some lead onto Kawanishi.
Thank you so much. I will try to write down
the only way he had.
Yep. Thank you so much.
他に質問はありますでしょうか。ないようでしたら、